The first order of business is to adopt the agenda. Does anybody have any additions or comments on the agenda, changes to the agenda? Then I entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
So moved, Keith. Seconded. Carol. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, the agenda is adopted. Next order of business is to approve the minutes of September 21, 2021. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
So moved, Keith. Seconded. Seconded, Carol. Any discussion? Right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is just some updates that Tracy is going to go over with us. So I'll turn the meeting over to her for that discussion.
Thank you. 3 updates this evening to follow up on the meeting last time and questions that may have been raised and project some information for the future. The first thing I wanted to mention is the weighting study. It is better labeled the pupil weighting study, I think. The co-chairs and I got a question about the pupil weighting story and a request for more information about that as it might affect the committee's study. For those of you who are not familiar with the pupil weighting study, it is a multi-year legislative project to review and revise the ways students are counted and weighted, hence the weighting study, for the tax rate calculations. Remember, it's really important to remember always that tax rates are based on spending per equalized pupil. So changing the dividend in that formula can have a big impact on a community's tax rate, even if spending doesn't change. What I'll tell you is we don't yet know what the legislature will do. I don't think they'll have a report until November, but we can project some of the possible impacts based on the considerations that the legislative committee is reviewing, and we'll do that, I hope, and talk a little bit about potential impacts at the next meeting, where I expect we will be talking about financial and tax rate projections. Okay, I do want to mention at this time that the admin team and I need your help and some direction regarding financial and tax rate projections, which is item 8 on the agenda tonight. So we'll come back to some framing of that to help us provide you with the information that would be useful for your ongoing consideration. So that's what's up on the pupil weighting study. It's coming and we will discuss it.
Yep, go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, I'd like to add something to that. Caleb Elder told me today that the task force could have a draft report as early as November. And the other thing that's important in this context is that the task force could also be addressing the issue of taxing based on property as opposed on income as opposed to property, and that could be part and parcel of the report in November.
What task force? I'm.
So this is the study task force in the legislature.
Okay, next thing by.
Any other questions on weighted study and how that relates to equalized people? Right. Thanks, Susan.
Perfect, sorry. So the next thing on the agenda is the revised draft work plan. As I told you from the get-go, this is an evolving document, and at some point this committee may take action to affirm all or some of the work plan. But for me, it's useful to ensure that the steps that this committee takes happen in a productive order, and so that you can reach the goals that you establish. So it really is, for me, an evolving working document. the October 4th version, which is linked in your agenda. And I do have a few hard copies if people are like me, just 3 hard copies and like hard copies to write on and mark up. Anybody? Oh, it's attached the minute. Never mind. You're all like me. I just want to begin by saying that everything from the last meeting forward has been moved and stretched out, as we discussed when you took action to extend the timeline. It is based on my recommendation, and you can take this or leave it or modify it, that we shoot for a recommendation to the State Board of Education if you are recommending that merger proposal go forward to the state board and ultimately to the electorate. Recommend that you have that to the state board by June. Given the regional complexities, given what the state board usually does in the summer and what everybody does in the summer, it makes sense to me to allow the state board to have a couple of meetings, a cushion in there in case they send you back to consider additional information or something like that. So that is my current thinking on the timeline for recommending that.
May I ask a question?
Yep, go ahead, Dave.
So, you say the timeline is if we're going to recommend merger, that's a broad term. Do you mean a unified school district or some other type of merger?
Yes,
Either one.
you haven't made that decision yet.
No, but if we have a merger that's not a unified district, does that have to go before the state board?
I will have to review the Union High School statutes, but I think it does because it's still creating a new municipal entity.
Okay.
I dropped my pencil. Hang on.
Brad?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but at the last meeting, I was doing it remote and communication wasn't the best, but I thought that the reason for extending the time for decision-making was the committee felt that the time that was originally suggested was too compressed to do a thorough job in filling our charge. So what you're proposing tonight, Wendy, is essentially is sort of modifying the vote that was taken at the last meeting. Is that my understanding?
No, if we are on the timeline we initially had, we would have to have our recommendation well before March. So now we're looking at having the recommendation in June.
I think, yeah, you would have needed a recommendation to the State Board of Ed by December.
January,
Yeah, December or January, and they would have had to say yes without any feedback for modification. So,
And it's also, it's our draft work plan, and so as we go through this, we'll see, right? Any other questions on the work plan? Right, Tracy?
can
February, March?
I highlight a few more things on the work plan?
Yes.
Just wanted to mention that with the stretching out of the timeline, I have penciled in the opportunity to do community engagement in November at both meetings, perhaps at both high schools. You can decide to do that or not. That's on the agenda for later tonight. As we discussed last time, we talked a little bit about getting information about educational opportunities and challenges looking forward in the different governance structure options. So I have penciled in a date for that. The next chunk of work could be a return to the Articles of Agreement and work to design the best alternative to the status quo so that we can compare the status quo and the future we project in the status quo with the future that you project for the alternate structures, and ultimately then make a recommendation to go forward with a vote to form a union or not. And of course, you can also include a rationale. The other thing that's pretty big new chunk of work is with this stretching out, you have the opportunity to use town meeting day to update communities on committees' work and or get input from communities on articles of agreement. So I penciled in some time for that. Again, you can decide if you want to do that or not, but have penciled that in. And finally, if you look into April and May, there are some dates that can be flexible at that point, but that is the time when you should be working on a recommendation and finalizing a study report and reviewing and revising it. So we can take less time doing that in the spring and stretch out some work that we're doing now. You could get that done very easily and immediately switch to preparing for the State Board of Ed. But I just want to be clear that there's some cushion there that we can play with in anticipation for the State Board of Ed meeting. The other thing that came up at the last meeting is a question about, with a November election, preparing for operations July 1, 2023, and having a report and recommendation in June to the State Board of Ed will likely give clarity to the current districts and the current administration, so some early fall work parallel to the regular budget development work could begin to position you to be ready to move forward with a merged budget proposal as soon as a new board is elected and sworn in at the organizational meeting. So it really makes it clear that that foundational work needs to be done and essentially gives the green light to the current boards and admin to start working on that. The other thing that will be important is communication and community engagement in the fall of 2022. And there's room for that. So that's the update. Yes, sir.
I've been invited to a community gathering to discuss facilities processes for Beaman Elementary School this coming Sunday. I was also invited to one, I think, in Starksboro. I'm just wondering how we feel about that. I'm sure I'm not the only one that's being invited to these.
We want to discuss that on the board? I would say initially just the facilities work that the boards are doing is different than the merger work that we're
Yeah,
doing.
this is not the board meeting. This is a community gathering by an external group.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying, it's the school boards that are doing the facilities work, so they're probably better able to respond to that.
Oh, I agree, and I
We are,
expect
yeah.
board members will be there, but they also want to know what we're doing.
So, one of the things we talked about early on, we had drafted those meeting summaries. And I thought we had sort of discussed having those be what we're authorized as a group to share, in terms of the message from the study committee group. I don't, that's sort of what I recall from when we had that conversation. Is there, I don't know if other people have thoughts, comments, Dave?
Well, anything that's said here in this meeting is public knowledge, right?
That's right.
So communicating public knowledge is perfectly okay, is it not?
Right, yeah, no, I was just saying we have the summaries too, that make it easier, but yeah,
Place to start from.
our
is the summary.
agendas, our meeting minutes, all of that. And it's all up on both the Addison Northwest Supervisory District and the Mount Aid Union School District websites. They have a merger study committee tab, and all of the agendas, all of the minutes, all of the Meet TV recordings, all that information, including the links in our agenda to various material, is all up there. So it's available to the public. Erica?
Just going up what you were saying, maybe it would be a good idea to have someone from our group be sure to be at these meetings, so that instead of saying, well, it's all out there and you can find it, say, yes, we're coming to you. We want you to know what's going on here. So I think if you were planning to go, it would be great if you
I
would
told them I would,
tell them.
and I would listen.
Yes, that's what, my experience with school boards is that the co-chairs, and you took action to this effect, the co-chairs are the spokespersons for the committee, and inquiries and requests for information go to them. Of course, you're citizens, and your job is enriched by being out there and listening and saying, I'm happy to be there, and my goal is to listen, is a wonderful, wonderful response. We also agreed that the committee briefs were the key messages that committee members could share when people had inquiries.
And certainly referring people to the material, because I know even for me, it's helpful to look at that material, the way it's organized sometimes. So
I'm looking at that website right now, like and I remember those briefs. I'm trying to find those briefs right now.
yeah,
I don't
think
see
the
those briefs at all.
Right, we did.
No, they're only at the minutes for at the end of the meeting minutes.
Okay, I was looking at them.
We don't have the brief separate from when we summarize at the end of the meeting. So we don't
At
have
the
all
end of the minutes.
Well, we can make them more prominent.
I think that would be nice, because then we can just say that, go to that to get them. It's really buried.
Yeah, that's no worries. We'll make it more prominent.
They're already in a folder, Sheila, so I can just add that folder to them.
Perfect. And then maybe, yeah.
Yep, and that's what's gonna be posted on Front Porch Forum and, right?
Yes.
And Brad and Dave, right? No, Dave and Erica, you guys are doing the.
Although I was just putting a link, I wasn't posting a whole lot of
Okay.
information. But I can if that would be helpful. I feel like with Front Porch Forum, there's too much, they just
Yeah,
throw one.
Yeah, so if those, so Gloria, that'd be great, and that's a great point. If we can add a link for that, perfect.
And I'll make
then
our
that'll help with
agenda.
those Front Porch Forum communications too.
Perfect. So one last thing related to the work plan. As I was doing it, I noticed that in February and March of 2022, the first Monday of the month and the second Tuesday of the month are 2 consecutive weeks. That means a really tight turnaround in terms of minutes and agendas and any preparatory work that anybody needs to do between meetings. And it can be pretty intense for committee members to be out working on this 2 weeks in a row. Want to be clear that we totally can do it. With those caveats about the intensity and the tight turnaround. You also could either cancel the first or second meeting of the month and schedule special dates as alternatives. It's a long way away, and you might not even be ready to address it now, because who knows what you're doing in February and March, right? But I wanted it to be on your radar and some guidance as to what would be useful in helping you address that, even if you even want to address it at all.
Any thoughts on addressing that now or waiting?
Waiting.
Yeah, the second meeting in February is during break.
Okay,
So everybody feels good about waiting on that? Thumbs up?
I'll bring it back to you like in December.
Great. Thanks, Tracy.
Okay.
Where are you going with that?
Yes, I am.
All right, any questions on that agenda item? Anything further? All right, let's move on to the fifth item on the agenda, values, goals, and considerations. Tracy's going to provide a synopsis of our
Yep.
discussion from last week, or 2 weeks ago, last
So-
meeting.
Linked in the agenda and in the board meeting packet at the front table, if you don't have it, is an expanded version of the synthesis of the first round of circles, with the additional information that you discussed at your last meeting. And the new information is in blue. As we did last time, I'd like to give you a few minutes to review that information and kind of digest it. And then engage in the circle protocol again and go around and invite each of you to share one brief addition or clarification, or you can pass. We will go around as many times as we need to make sure everybody has a chance to share all the additions or clarifications that they think are important. While we're talking now, I'll remind you of the norms. They're in the center, but again, they're respecting the talking pieces, speaking from your heart, and listening with your heart, speaking with respect, and listening with respect, and really remaining engaged in the circle are the important ones. I also want to emphasize speaking to the center and sharing your thoughts or ideas rather than responding to others or addressing others in the circle. In the event that later this evening you decide that you want to be circle facilitators at a community meeting or at multiple community meetings, I wanted myself to be a good role model of facilitation so that you're well prepared in the event that you're facilitating. At the last meeting, when we were in the small groups, there were so many amazing ideas being shared, and committee members were so intrigued. There were some side conversations and there were some responses to one another. And I was just as intrigued watching you process new ideas and different perspectives. I completely forgot to facilitate. So I apologize. And we'll try and do a better job this evening and might offer a gentle reminder of like, please remember to direct your comments to the circle or to the center, or speak from your heart. Tell your story or your idea to kindly remind people the best ways to communicate in a circle. So with that, I will give you 5 minutes to look at the updated synthesis. Think about what's in your heart and in what's in your head, and a clarification or an addition. And remember that we'll go around as many times as we need to get people's ideas out. Okay, 5 minutes is up. we're going to transition into the circle. And I told you one good practice in restorative circles is to tell a little story about the talking piece and the centerpiece. And last time I shared the elephant, and I think that metaphor, both the elephant as the whole and everybody seeing their part of the elephant, is really going to stay with me throughout this process. This is a different talking piece I use sometimes, and it is my magic wand. Sheila told a story at the last meeting of her response to an interview question at some point in her career when the interviewer asked how she was going to meet all the needs of her students using research-based techniques and data-involved practices and engage their parents, and some sort of complicated question like that. And I believe she responded with, well, I'm going to use my magic wand. I think most educators and people who are drawn to caring about education wish for a magic wand, because we care so much about children and learning, and we understand the importance of public education to our communities. And the stakeholders are taxpayers and citizens. So it feels like a complex and heavy challenge, and we all wish for a magic wand. So this is mine, and you can ding it if you want, because then it really feels like you did some magic. So I am going to start with Mary Kate, looking for just one clarification or addition if you have it. And again, keep it short to respect the opportunities for others to speak, and we'll come back to you if you have more to add later on.
So I'm just reading through this whole list, just amazed at everything that's on this list. I don't really have anything to add. I just have a thought that the piece where we have the things we're most proud of, for me, I worry most about not being able to really meet and provide for each child as we struggle with the cost issues.
I have more of a statement, I guess, as usual. I think it's important to me and colleagues that I'm working with that going back to my high school principal had sort of a theme that went around the whole time, and it was pride in our purpose. They were the letters we saw, those were the words we saw when we walked into the building. They were on t-shirts that the teachers had and you know, folders that we had. And I always seem to come back to that. And I remember, you know, he said, whatever you do, don't ever lose your pride in your purpose. So I think it's really important that we keep that, and, you know, I think that helps foster healthy, unified administration, students and teachers. You know, we all come with the same pride in our purpose. So I just think of that.
Thank you. It's satisfying. All right. I think overall I was just struck, and maybe it's just because it's boiled down to bullet points, that everything here is framed relatively positively about what it is we want from our schools and our communities. I don't know, I was just really excited about that as a personal note, but also I dwelt on the taxpayer value section, and I feel like that could all be, like, there's so many commonalities between all these points, and it seems to just boil down to control and value. Whatever that value means, it seems to be highly variable, but that just seems very, those two terms seem very relevant and impactful to the work ahead of us, trying to figure out what our communities value and how they can retain an amount of control that makes them feel good about whatever this committee recommends to them.
I guess I'm gonna use the wand to break the rules a little bit, because when I'm looking at this list, I have something on my mind that I can't stop thinking about, which isn't directly on this list, but just that over the last week or so, I've been hearing a lot and reading a lot in the paper, letters to editor, and on the radio about people wanting, school choice, wanting to send, their kids out of the district or to private schools and have their public school money support that. And so I guess I thought that's really a sign that is, this is asking evidence that a system is transparent and well-governed, and I feel like that's evidence that something's not working when people just want to wholly give up on the public schools. And so for me, that's been a very demoralizing thing to hear over the last couple of weeks. So it is nice to see all the positive things on there, but I really worry, and I really want our community to be a place where instead of our students who are residents in our towns tuitioning out to other schools, I want other towns' students to come to our schools to say, wow, Virginia's so cool. Mount Abe, so awesome. They have a swimming pool. We want to go there. So that's kind of my hope for the future.
I don't think you broke the rules.
Okay.
I think you shared an addition.
I wasn't gonna say anything till choice was brought up. I was thinking about that today, actually, on the way over here even. I don't go anywhere without having a discussion about schools. I spent the week in Canada visiting my sister, who is a teacher, a long-time teacher, and we talked a lot about schools and kids. Everybody has a really wide choice of schools to send their children to. Thousands of schools you could send your child to. Really isn't, the discussion really isn't about choice, it's a misnomer. The discussion is about who pays for it, that's what the discussion's about. And we ought to frame it that way.
I was struck by the wide interpretations of the word local. And I also, in my head, I guess something that I've thought of recently is when we were talking about our timeline or this type of thing, is everything so unsettled because or is it going to become more unsettled the longer that we take to get settled? And I just wanted to think that as I was reading all of this, I just kept going back to that in my head.
I was really struck by, there's the education costs and then the evidence that a system is transparent and well-governed. And I think in some ways, the taxpayers might not understand the value that they're getting from education if we don't do a really good job making sure that our system is transparent and well-governed. Because there are so many expenditures that the school boards don't have any real control over, like special education and healthcare costs. And that kind of transparency or communication with the taxpayers is really of the utmost importance, because if they don't understand why we are where we are, some of it's declining enrollment, but in terms of costs, they can't really appreciate what is being provided as far as value.
Thank you. It's interesting that you use this as a tool. I use it also as a lawyer. When I have new clients come in, I'll often say to them, if you could wave a magic wand, what would you like to get out of this? So I'm not going to wave a magic wand, but I'd pass this magic wand to our constituents, to our parents, to our students, and let them wave the magic wand. Looking at the list, the summary list, I mean, I'm not sure I have a whole lot more to add. I think we covered the waterfront, a lot of admirable sort of aspirations, goals, challenges, and whatnot. I would maybe say one thing about the entry regarding pre-K education. I think that is critical. I think that there isn't a overt enough recognition that the equity issues related to the provision of pre-K are significant, and they're especially severe in a rural state like Vermont. So I would hope that our constituents, if they wave a magic wand, would say, give us pre-K and make it equitable.
I think this might be more of an addition than a clarification, but it's somewhat of a response to the comment about choice down there, but, oh, yep. So I was thinking of things that we could improve on, and just even in our current structure, like at the elementary level, we don't offer choice, really. We have town schools, and you go to the school that for the town you live in, but could we offer more choice in our current structure or in the structure, in any future structure we might have? Might be an area to improve on.
I don't have any clarifications and I don't have any additions. I look at the list. There's divergence in each category, which I guess is good. But as I look down the list, I get really confused as to the direction that this list might be giving us. But it's comprehensive, and I think, at least from my point of view, there's nothing I can add to it.
As I went down through the list, something that popped out at me was expenses that yield outcomes. And through the work over the past few years, it really made me think, wow, how complicated that is, and problematic in so many ways. But at the same time, you know, I'm hopeful that that's what we can get to. Have, you know, reasonable expenses that yield really high outcomes for our students. So I'm hopeful that throughout this process, you know, we can get to a point where we're building really flexible pathways for students so that we can really meet the needs of all of our students, not just those that are planning on college or career, but students, all of our students, the most traumatized students.
I wanted to add to the ensure continued work for an aligned curriculum that was mentioned the last time. We've done a lot of work here at UHS on proficiency-based grading, and that's taken a lot of work across the board. And my colleagues and I have talked a lot about this, like if there is a merger, who makes the decision on how that aligns together? So how will this work be done? Who will make the decisions on the curriculum and because there's different curriculums in both districts. So there's a lot of work, like the merger is the first step, like the buildings and who goes to which building, but then there's a lot of inside work that has to be done. And that's mind blowing to me. I think that, so that's where my mind has been at.
I'm going to add to that a little bit, I think, because I lived it, my last 10 years at Mount Abe was around trying to institute the multiple pathways to learning. But we only achieved it for a small handful of students. The idea was, as Stephanie said, to make it the model for the whole school. And that continues to be a goal that I think both high schools are working towards.
Reading through this, I am also struck by how positive it is, how many things there really are to be proud of in both school districts. But one thing that kind of jumps out at me is a link between the value of education and what it is to be a local school, and how important it is to tie those together, because people feel engaged in a school and it becomes their local school if they feel a part of it, if they're going to sporting events and concerts and theater productions, and if they see productive members of society from the schools working around town, then they become a part of the school and they feel more pride and they're more willing to pay for more programs because they see the value and the return on value. So really making sure that as we put whatever it is together that we're going to build towards, that we focus on making sure that we have this front-facing outcome and we're showing the community how to be engaged in the schools and encouraging the students to be engaged in the community in the same way, to really make people proud of what we're putting together and be willing to support it no matter what it is we decide to go for.
I will keep the wand going around. I'm gonna just put it around. If you have nothing to say, you can just pass the wand and say pass. Really want a model.
Yes.
I guess I will add that as we dissect all this and try to figure out what values are, at the beginning of the page, in big bold letters should be student outcomes. So students are really the most important thing over and above any of the other considerations. I don't know if that's a good word or not, but when you talk about local, when you talk about schools, when you talk about taxes, they all are guiding parameters of reasonableness, but really the most important thing that we can develop here is an improved student outcome.
You were mentioning about how it was mind-boggling to think about merging the curriculum, and it just made me think, I'm so excited to do that if we get a chance, because I think we have some amazing people in our district that can really do great things. I agree.
I'm sensing that everybody's had a chance to have their voices be heard. Did a great job following the rules. And as a follow-up to this, I will synthesize yet again, and we'll work to distill it into a cohesive set of filters or frameworks that you might use to evaluate going forward. we have some time before it's reasonable for a break. So it's a perfect segue, and it came out in the circle, and it's on the agenda, to talk about your ideas of community engagement. Again, it was mentioned tonight, and whether or not a process like this, and I can give you an idea of how you might do that, could be a useful community engagement strategy to get similar ideas and input and voice from various stakeholder groups from the entire community. I have to turn to my page for that. So if it's okay, I'll go on to that.
Yep. I think that makes sense since we're running a little early and take a break after we finish this section. Everybody good with that? Okay.
And then we could either have a little more time for the committee members' homework assignments, or since we kept you a little late last time, we could get done a little early tonight. So here's a proposal for community engagement planning that you can modify, revise, adapt, but it's a process that's I've seen work in other settings and can be a springboard for your thinking. I suggest that you consider doing some community engagement events that follow the same format multiple times, at least 2 evenings, perhaps here and at the other high school. And that you recruit stakeholders from a variety of views and perspectives to attend. One doesn't have to be a resident of Mount Abe to attend at Mount Abe's event. They can come here, vice versa. You can come to 2. So 2 evenings with heavily recruited stakeholders with a variety of perspectives, and the goal of mixing stakeholder values. You also could do additional engagement events using that same formula or process, and that's totally up to you in terms of what you think you need to do to invite people to think in similar ways to the opportunities that you've had today about what's important in our 2 school districts going forward. And again, you'll want to think about teachers, students, community members, who include parents, citizens without children, businesses and municipal leaders, and so on and so forth. The experience, as you've already felt, is enriched when people hear other people's perspectives, including when it's not their own. So the way that a format could go is that community members, students, teachers, your state, everybody that is invited goes to a large group introduction, maybe in the cafeteria, maybe in a space like this. And there's a brief committee introduction, who we are, what the committee's doing, your timeline and process, and an introduction to the circle process, which I can script for circle facilitators. I found that there are 2 things that get people excited about coming to these sorts of events. One is food, and the other is student performance. Perhaps the music department could get some middle-level kids out here to take a risk and do a performance or 2 that they'll be nervous about because it's early in the season, but it's okay to not be perfect and to practice with an authentic audience. I've also seen situations where the 2 choruses from each of the schools come together and do a joint performance. They don't get many opportunities to practice together. That's a big deal. They practice independently and then maybe get one practice together, but it's incredible fun. So kids bring adults. So those are some ideas to think about, food and performances. So after an introduction, guests break into circles. We simply ask folks to keep groups of a certain size and mix themselves so that they choose circles where there aren't a lot of other people that they know. A facilitator goes through the circle process and goes just as far as you can go. You'll find some circles will go really quickly and they'll have 1 or 2 word answers and they'll go through all of the prompts really quickly. Others will get through 2 questions. You know, if we put forth 5 questions. What you can do to manage that is that 1, you can come to multiple events. 2, what's useful is to follow up with a survey around the time the final event happens with the same questions you had in the circle. You can get a little feedback on how the evenings went and what people thought of that, but also repose the questions so people who didn't get to share everything they wanted to share can do that. And at that time, people who weren't able to attend can also take the opportunity to share some feedback for the event. Everybody comes back at the end of the time that they were in circles, and the committee can share the key ideas that you came up with from a similar process. Remind them that you're going to take their feedback and use that to enrich the development of a framework for reviewing options, and thank them for their participation. So that's how an event can go. There are a number of details that need to be worked out. Do you want to use the same 5 questions? Do you want different questions? 5 is a lot, especially in that setting. If you start with a question like, who are you? Where are you from? What excites you about being here? You know, you start with a really safe one. Again, the questions, do you just want to do 2? Do you want to do more? I've been thinking about how we want to manage group size in the context of COVID and what's reasonable. And I don't have any answers to that, and that's something we'll have to decide together, consistent with whatever the school guidelines are. A little detail, I recommend that you get people's emails as they sign in, and it's even easier if there's a iPad or something there and they can enter in their emails as part of the sign-in, so we can follow up with the survey and send everybody the results of what we learned when we're done with it. Need to think about both circle facilitation and note-taking and how we structure that. Again, food, performance, both, advertising and recruiting. That can be from porch forum, that can be school announcements, that can be direct mail, that can be postcards, that can be an ad in the paper, that can be a press release. In my experience, we've done almost all of those to get participation, and some neighborly arm twisting as well. And then just a deadline for the survey and additional feedback so that we can close that and synthesize it and see what we learned. So,
Might have been what I would have added in with the second wand pass, but one thing I've thought of myself as a teacher is if, and I think this went also back to my original comment about feeling unsettled, is I would imagine that is a group of stakeholders that might actually feel the most unsettled and could also be pretty excited, but also rather like not sure what the heck is going on. So I wonder about, while I appreciate the idea of like having all the voices together, it might be also an opportunity to really get faculty feedback. time. A lot of the same questions about, I think, you know, where could we improve? What are we most proud of? That type of stuff. I think just getting those values, but within maybe even mixed school, like mixed districts, but all school voices. I don't know, I thought.
I'm also thinking about how, when we, or over the past year, we did conferences through Zoom, and we found that we had more parents there that we usually want to see, but we don't usually see. So I'm just wondering if, we can apply that here and invite community members that may not come into a larger setting, but may hop on a Zoom, and maybe not, maybe they won't show their faces, or maybe, they type things in the chat instead of speaking verbally, but it would be nice to consider how to bring everyone in.
So I was thinking along those lines, and I wrote down the question, how many breakout rooms can you have in Zoom? Because if we make this as a Zoom event, or at least partially a Zoom event, because of COVID, and also because we might generate more attendance. Can you have a dozen breakout rooms? Can you create a circle, so to speak, a Zoom circle, and pass the wand in a breakout room, and would that work?
Yes. There's a strategy.
Go ahead, Brad.
See me?
Brad?
Yeah.
Sorry.
I think that the idea of having a Zoom session, perhaps even, in addition to the in-person sessions, makes a whole lot of sense. Over the last few years, I've been struck by I'm not a communications specialist, but I have been struck by pretty substantial failure over at least in MAUSD to engage people and get people to come to meetings and really, get meaningful feedback. It's usually people don't show up to meetings, or if they do, it's just a few, and it's always the same people, which is, it's great that these people are committed and they're important, but we're not reaching, the number of folks and the different kinds of folks that we really should be. So I would think that having, a combination of in-person meetings, I like that idea of having a musical. In fact, I can get my daughter to organize it for you if you want. She's all into that kind of stuff. But I mean, I think that's good. I think the Zoom meetings are good. I think that we need to keep them relatively short, because I've gone to a bunch of these meetings. They're organized at 8 o'clock on Saturday morning and go till noon. They do give coffee and donuts, but I mean, this is not quite enough. But have different lengths, different media, different kinds of events to get different kinds of people. I guess I really think that there's no one size fits all kind of community engagement event.
Yeah, I almost don't want to say this, but we, on the Mount Abe side of the table, went and spent, 15, 16 months of community engagement to develop values, if you will. And, the things that bubbled up were a lot of values with, student processes and student outcomes, community, brick and mortar, and as those were all distilled, the whole process indicated a lot of these student outcome issues were important. Well, we've got a town that is voting to leave the district now because their brick and mortar is more important than some of the district's initiatives, if you will. If we go through the same process we did here, to me it seems the questions are rather abstract. And it seems like we could be running the risk of not asking the right questions, or maybe the hard questions, if you will, about I don't know how you draw it out objectively as opposed to emotionally, what the success of a merger could be from their point of view, and if they would have supported. And without somehow getting past those kind of questions, I wonder in the final analysis, if we figure out what the districts are doing well and what they should be improving on, and what taxpayers feel. I mean, we already know what taxpayers feel. If we're going to get anything tangible out of that process that would help us make an informed decision. And if you go along down that path and ask the direct questions, well, what do you think of the merger? You know, you're opening up potentially another can of worms as well, you know, but I think there's a risk there.
Did you have something? Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that brings up the point that it's really important, I think, to be really, really clear about what we intend to use this information for, that we're gathering from people. So if it feels like a little, like, to me, not the best move to go out right now without us having done any, well, just a little bit of preparation and say, do you want to merge or not? Because that's sort of what we're here to figure out. What does it mean to merge before we ask the question of, do we want to do it or not? So this kind of information gathering would be more aimed at saying, when we as a committee look at what are the possibilities for merging, how do you as community members and stakeholders and constituents want us to weigh the different factors? How do you want us to decide, is it worth it or not, based on, you know, what do you value in a school district? But I agree that it's really, like, how do we formulate questions to get at that? I agree it needs to be concrete. I do feel like these questions are kind of abstract, and that's why, like you say, the list that we come out of can go any which way, and does that really get us a lot further down the path towards having some kind of criteria? Sorry.
That was excellent. Your hand is up.
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, so that was intriguing. What I was thinking earlier is we have, Tracy has put before us, you know, possibilities in the first draft of the agreement. And we could put those possibilities out. Another thought I had was ask the question, what do you, I think we can fairly certainly say that, we did a survey and we managed to get everybody involved. Everybody would want better outcomes for students at a tax that they could afford. Now, a tax that they could afford, you know, varies greatly, and we don't really have, in my view, we don't really have any valid measures of student outcomes. So what do we expect to get when we ask that question, right? Emotions, that's what we would get. So maybe some sort of specific thing, varieties of mergers or a single merger, and ask not just what do you think of this, or which merger style would you pick? Then the question is, why did you pick it? And then maybe we could get some of the questions you were asking, maybe I think that was really a good presentation. I think we need to get those kinds of, and I agree, just asking vague responses from circles, we get, a laundry list of stuff that won't move us forward.
I love what you had to say. I completely agree. We need to preface the whole conversation with, we are exploring options and we want to understand what's important in the community in order to improve the outcomes for our children, our students. What's important to you if we decide to merge, or as we approach discussing merging, and I think it's so important to start those conversations now, just to get people thinking about it. Because the last thing we want to do is come up with our proposed best idea after we have all the data and say, we decided this is best for you to the community. We want them to be part of the process, because that's the only way we're going to have community support. So yes, prefacing every conversation we have with, we are learning with you, and we want to know what you think.
I also want to put out there that I think along with that, we also need to be thinking about the students. Students are talking about it in the school setting also. They're hearing about it from their parents. I think these conversations need to be happening in the school building too. I've been thinking about it like it might happen in a morning meeting setting, where we have a conversation, have some questions that we set out to the morning meeting advisors, and one morning meeting is dedicated to having a circle. We have circles quite often at our school, so I'm certain you guys do too. So it might be that we have a set of questions that we offer up, and then we bring back information, some data back to this team, because I feel like they need to be included.
I'll say, relative to that point, Liz, who is the liaison for the MAUSD student liaison to this committee, said that that person would like to be involved in what the work done with students, and then offered that the student council advisor also said that potentially the student council could be involved. And I don't know, Sheila and Keith, there's no rep yet from Virgins, but perhaps the student council would be.
Our student council is in flux right now.
Yeah, we don't
Okay,
have a
so,
student
yeah,
council, but-
Or some other leadership
So I mean,
group.
I can take that back to the person who's leading it right now, but I
Or
think our
some
best bet.
leadership group, but
Yeah.
rather than being necessarily you being on, coming to all these meetings, but at least be involved in some group of students that want to be involved in that process of getting student input.
When you're ready,
Did
I
you
have a
wanna go
suggestion.
first? Go ahead.
No, I want you to go first.
Troy Flaherty said something that stuck with me last meeting, and the idea behind it was for individual communities, very concerned about local schools. At what age are we willing to allow our students to move on to another school? And I thought that was so powerful, and I'm wondering if that is a question. I just wanted to throw it out there that we might want to add to our question list. I think that would be helpful.
So I have a suggestion. I put in the draft work plan that community engagement planning could be a big chunk of the next meeting. And what I could do for you is kind of script an intro and a closing, and create for you a longer list of questions that you can choose from, based on not only what you answered, the questions we used, but some of the suggestions and discussions you had tonight. And it's one that could be adapted to students, and it could be adapted to a Zoom format, But I've got to be clear up front. I could not facilitate that for you. I think you'd need a skilled Zoom user to be essentially a producer, but it may be possible. The other thing is that even though if you decide to give a dedicated opportunity to the students at both high schools, for example, it's still useful to have their voices with adults and with adults from other communities in a face-to-face setting or a Zoom-to-Zoom setting. So being strategic about that as well. Again, it's hearing from people who have life experiences and views and hopes and dreams that might be different than yours that really enrich our thinking and our ability to move forward. Go there.
I just wanted to add to that, what you were saying about, the teacher voices. My response as a parent and somebody in education at a different institution is that as a non-teacher, I always want to hear the teacher view. So I want them at my meetings so I can follow there, because I feel like the teachers are the ones, who are right there, and they're going to be the most affected by this in this very direct way. Of course, the students too, but the students will move out of the system. The teachers are the ones that are, there and carrying things on from year to year. So I agree, like maybe we should have, teacher-focused groups, but also encourage teachers to come to the other public groups.
I was thinking it like the student group kind of thing,
Right.
Just making sure that there was a targeted
Yeah.
time, but that those larger groups, I couldn't agree with you more, but it does have to be inviting, because there's a lot of maxed out group right now, and they also, some of them don't live in the district, so they don't feel that same ownership. Like, I don't live where I work, right? I don't have the same interaction.
I can talk with Patrick and Sheila about dedicated Q&A for teachers, because I'm hearing employees, not just teachers. I'm hearing two questions. What are the possibilities? What does this mean educationally? What does this mean for the future of our district? But I'm guessing there's another layer of question, which is, what does this mean for me? How does this impact my contract, my working conditions, the expectations, the school I'm assigned to, all of those things. Got it. So that's an important area to address, and I come to every meeting with a to-do list, a follow-up list, and I will put that on the list, and we can talk about some options.
I feel like for staff and educator engagement, there needs to be some component of anonymity and the ability to at least submit questions, because they have financial and personal obligations that they may not want to voice.
I've got a good process for that, and I can share that with Sheila and Pat. Been there.
Yeah, I guess I would add to that, even on trying to be an observer here, that I think there's, just as you were talking about with the community members, there needs to be a feedback loop so that it's not just information out to the staff, but a feedback loop back to this group. I heard Becca talking about some pretty challenging chunks of work, right? That, to imagine engaging in that work over a really short period of time with staff in a way that honors the journey they've already been on and all the hard work they've already done. It's not work that happens in a matter of months. So I guess just the opportunity to provide that feedback back to this group will be essential. We can let the teachers know what's happened so far here and what the possibilities are, but I think it's going to just surface a lot more, feedback for this group in terms of the work ahead.
Anything else on community engagement? Tracy, have any
So I think I have my marching orders. If you could think about some of those key questions and what you're comfortable doing, that would be super helpful, because it's an all hands on deck, from communication to the actual events to synthesizing, but it's really important to make sure people feel heard and that what they had to say was considered before a decision was made.
You guys, great communication, or, yeah, great feedback, communication on that. Now we're only 10 minutes ahead of schedule, so we'll take a 5-minute break, and then we can come back and maybe still be a little ahead of schedule, but I think it was worth it to spend the time you did on that, so thanks, everybody. All right, we're gonna start with Kevin, and he's gonna highlight the regional plan, Addison County regional plan. There was a link as well at the bottom of the agenda to that information. But Kevin, if you want to take the floor and kind of.
Does anybody need a hard copy of that?
Sure.
Actually, my computer's
Troy is on Zoom.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you did, okay.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So do you want to message him?
I've talked to him a couple times.
If he
Yep,
has
yep,
anything.
yep, that's where we're at.
Can you see all the names that are on Zoom?
Yep,
Can you give those to me?
yep, please.
And I can ask people to identify
Oh,
themselves.
yeah.
It doesn't say. But,
I started by being asked to distill the Addison County Regional Plan draft population and housing section that they are working on in consideration of putting into the regional plan. I took the liberty of taking another document prepared by a group of interns for the Addison County Community Trust and integrating a certain amount of that document, as well as the population projections and history within the NESDEC reports that both Mount Abe and Virgins districts prepared. And so the first two documents really talk about general population. There's discussion about ages, there's discussions about, school-age kids, aging populations, and that sort of stuff generally in those documents. And then the third one gives a balance that it projects students, and it doesn't look at area populations, it's just a student projection. So if you were to look at this report and you start getting kind of droopy eyes and whatnot, the gist of the report, as far as comprehensiveness, is the regional planning section. That's the first section. The community trust section provides a little bit different flavor, but it's really a supporting document. There's not a lot of news in that document. It is more recent data because it was prepared this summer, whereas the regional planning document as it stands right now was up to the 2020 census. I talked with the author of that particular regional planning document, and they have the 2020 census information, and they're working it into that document, which she's going to send to me or provide for me as we may want to update this particular section in the document. What the discussion in both documents comes down to really housing and affordable housing and the tightness of the market in Addison County. And in particular, in the regional planning document, any recent construction has been high-end construction, if you will. So it puts pressure on families that are starting out and lower income families that don't have a lot of capital or resources to start investing in a house, and serves the people that have adequate income, probably retirees or people in their later years of employment, which would be past years that they have children, bearing children and that sort of thing. So the regional plan talks about natural increase in population and migration. And I pulled out sections, and by the way, I plagiarized this whole thing. So I didn't read it and rewrite it. I just pulled out the higher level or the summary thing. So if there's some paragraph in here and you peruse and you say that doesn't make any sense, or I'd like to know more about that. You go back to the original document, and there's a lot more support in the verbiage in the original document. So yeah, I didn't work hard on writing this. If you look, coming through this thing, it talks about aging population, which is on my page 3. You know, in 2000, 25% of the population was school age, 11% was over 65. In 2010, the school age population dropped to 16.5. And those over 65 increased to 13%. By 2018, the school age population was 13.3%. And the over 65 population was 18.5%. So that shouldn't be news to anybody that's been following, you know, the declining populations in schools. The other thing that I think we briefly touched on this that kind of sparked some of the conversation is small households. On page 4, between 1970 and 2000, the average household dropped from 3.4 to 2.56 persons per household. And since then, up until 2018, that's dropped down to 2.31 per household. And I don't know who the 0.31 person is, but they sound like they might have a partial split personality or something, you know. And the other thing I found, I wasn't totally aware of it, but there's been a decrease in the rate of construction over the last 40 years in Addison County. And if you look on the page 5, there's a chart, and it shows you typically the years the housing stock was built. And you can see quite a bit of it was before 1939, and that happens to be a large chunk in Bristol Village, as well as some in a significant chunk in Virgins. And then from the 40s, you can see it bulge out to the boom in the 70s and 80s and 90s, coming into the 2000. And then since that Great Recession period, if you will, where construction really stagnated, you can see it hasn't picked back up. And the other thing, and I did mention before, if you look in, like I said before, the size of housing being built right now is like significantly larger than it was during these boom years, which is not consistent with what the county needs for young families or people starting out. Sure.
When I read that, I interpret it a little bit differently in my head. I keep thinking, if we're building, that the size of the actual family has gotten smaller because it's this aging population coming in. So if we only build things that accommodate them, won't we continue to age? So that's I'm like, I guess I read the large house that's gonna accommodate a family more than a retired parent.
Right. So
I just been throwing that out there as a different way of looking at it.
So traditionally, and there's some debate about how saleable you can sell like a 2-bedroom house or a 1-bedroom house. So traditionally, people are buying or building 3-bedroom houses. The rub comes where, as you are going through a trial raising a family, yeah, that's suitable, but people remain in those houses for as long as they can. So you've still got that housing stock, but it's underutilized as far as occupancy. And then if you take the fact that the population's increasing, or the age is increasing the population, so you got more empty nesters, if you will, still occupying single family units. And the other thing is the dynamics of other families. There's more single parent families. So all of a sudden, that drives that rate of occupancy down as well. And plus the fact that you've got less people raising families. And somewhere in there, I don't know if I got to it yet, or I may have passed by it, indicates, that I think that it goes through the timeline of families with children in housing just has dropped off as well. So there's a mismatch of housing stock that creates those numbers that keep things going down. And as people want to continue building houses, sometimes they're building, the 3-bedroom house, if you will, as opposed to something that's size appropriate for their needs, because that's just the tradition people do. That help?
Yeah.
So what you're saying is that when people are building a house, they're building a house bigger than they really need, probably because they have the money to do that.
That has been the most recent trend, yes.
The paragraph on the COVID pandemic effect on the immigration, I was hoping to see some numbers projecting how many of those families had kids that are going to be populating our schools.
Yeah, I don't know. I can talk with Katie a little bit, but that was told verbatim out of her report. Somewhere, I almost remember somewhere here in one of these other COVID boxes, if you will, it talks about 60 and older people that come, as well as people that can work remotely, which has been fitting in with the state's initiative to have, remote workers moving to the state, so.
Any other questions for Kevin? Kevin, if you get that information on the once they've correlated the 2020 data, let me and Martha know, and we can add that to the agenda.
Okay.
Or if you get other information from Katie on the pandemic immigration question that I'd asked.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
Understanding that population and thus enrollment in schools is declining and or stagnating, and housing is the big variable, and the current state evolved, at least to some degree, from the 2008 recession. With the issues of supply costs, the availability of skilled labor, the zoning issues and the infrastructure issues, and the mismatch between the current housing and the needs of families of today, what's the timeline for seeing housing trends change in a way that might impact enrollment? Is it years?
This is my
Is it-
opinion, of course.
Yes.
I think 10 years would be optimistic, and probably 20 years would be much more realistic. There is a recognition, and the state has several different avenues of encouragement, I think you could say, for local towns, zoning boards, planning commissions, those type of people to start looking at town centers, town building closer. As a state, we went through this whole period of time because there was this 10-acre loophole for sanitary, septic and all that kind of stuff that ingrained a lot of large lot development and whatnot. And now, from the state's point of view, when you start talking about energy conservation, transportation costs, transportation emissions, if you will, walkability to services, the need to provide a close center for people that can't afford transportation, all those kind of things are coming about, and from several different points of view of encouragement, I guess you could say, from the state to try to get towns and regional planning commissions to start looking at how they're zoning for housing and change their zoning regulations to allow essentially smaller lot sizes and encourage, multi-dwelling units and conversion of large housing stock. Bristol Village is a classic example, certainly well, not classic because Middlebury and Virgins have the same issue, but you've got these large 1,800 mill town houses that are relatively underutilized unless you've got 6, 8 kids in them now, and so what is a good adaptive reuse for that type of housing stock as well?
Go ahead, Dave.
So you have a chart in here. I think it's the population of other states in our region. A couple of them are in worse shape than Vermont in terms of loss of population, and a couple of them are marginally better. Aren't these trends you're talking about not just Vermont, also Northeast and also nationwide? So you're talking about the NASDAQ chart? I guess, I don't.
Page 12.
Yeah.
12, yeah. So NASDAQ, another chart in the NASDAQ report, I pulled that chart out to look at regional. There's another chart in the NASDAQ report that outlines migration throughout the country. The Northeast, North Central, they are projecting or have projected will lose population, and the South and the Southwest, if you will be increasing population. So there's this migration out of one area of the country. It's not necessarily national, it's a few regions, and we just happen to be in one of those regions. That student population, or is that overall population? Because this chart is student. This chart is student population, but I think, well, I shouldn't say this, but I think you'll find it carries well around on population, because if you go back to the regional plan, there is a chart on page 2 that shows you by county the inflow and outflow, and I don't know what the time frame is for this chart. It's not dated for the parameter of time, but if you look at that chart, it'll show you the percent change by counties in the state as well. Marginally better than most counties. Yeah, and if this is a Northeast problem, what makes anyone think we can draw people into the Northeast to bring their children here? Or that's a good question. Is the notion here that if we build housing, they will come? There are, and the reason why this report was put before this group is there was comments at one of these meetings about how do we increase the school-age population and what sort of things you can do to it. And if you follow on the Mount Abe side, at least, the whole discussion about declining population, there are some people that very staunchly believe that we can grow ourselves out of this problem. So this report, I think, was identified as a rationalization that may not be very realistic.
Yeah, I think I may have raised this at the previous meeting, but I did have a conversation with the folks at the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, and what their big issue is how is looking at the role of the state in sort of energizing or affecting or stimulating local economic development, and with two major sort of points. First being workforce development, and then of course housing. When I talked with them at the beginning of September, they did say that they would have a new policy draft by the end of the month or early in October. So I think it would be probably good to get back to them and see where they are on that. What would the policy, what would it be?
What would the policy be that they're updating the draft, have a draft?
Well, the
update?
policy is, again, the role of the state in spurring economic development.
Yeah.
In
So
the
like,
localities, you know.
So subdivision, the 10 acre subdivision rules, if they change those, that may change development, but it will take some time for that all to happen.
And I think it's not necessarily to have a policy that would be implemented, but looking at the role of the state in this kind of policy development around the state.
Yeah.
I think
And do
that's
you have a sense, Brad, in terms of, so they're supposed to come out with some recommendations, do you have any sense in terms of timeframes for them to change
They told,
statutes?
the guy I talked to said that they'd have something, you know, within a month or so. And according to my notes, I talked with them on September 1st, so.
Yeah, and that would just be recommendations for the legislature to,
Oh, I don't know about that.
okay.
So,
Yeah, maybe keep an eye on that.
Yeah, I'll
Brad.
give him, he invited me to give him a call back, so
Yeah, okay,
I won't be shy.
okay, yeah.
you
you
know
know.
that particular department has a lot, and when I refer to a lot of the downtown structure, the community, the revitalization, building village cores, walkable distances, a lot of that stuff is driven through zoning initiatives through that particular department.
Don't they have something called a Vermont Trend or something? What's it, it's on their big, it's their sort of their mantra?
I don't know.
Erica?
Yeah, Dave was mentioning this chart, I think, looking at different counties in Vermont, and, you know, something that, that I've thought about and maybe heard other people talking about is that it's a question that, you know, Addison County is neighboring Chittenden County, and yet the counties that are growing around Chittenden County are to the north and the east, and why not us? What is it that we are not doing? Because it's a bedroom community for me. I work at UVM, I commute there, it's not a big deal. Why is it that we are not pulling people into Addison County the way that Lamoille and Franklin County are pulling people in?
There's no discussion in the regional plan about that. It does discuss pressure from Chittenden County onto some of the northern towns, particularly Ferrisburg. It specifically lists Ferrisburg and it attributes a lot of the population size of Ferrisburg to, you know, Chittenden County pressures.
Yeah, just for curiosity's sake, as a resident of Lamoille County and not an official expert in this, I can tell you one of the big reasons is Lamoille County has a tremendous amount of housing. So we have second homes, we have vacation homes, we have townhomes in areas of Lamoille County, and that is one of the places that, or those are the places that new people are moving to. So
Do they have
housing.
kids? Do they have kids?
Some do and some don't.
Well, I was gonna say, on the NASDAQ chart of declining populations on page 12, it states in the table legend, almost half of New England districts have been growing in pre-K to 12 enrollment, and a similar number are declining, often in rural areas. I mean, I know anytime I go into Chittenden County, because I work up there, there is so much growth in housing developments and apartment buildings. It's amazing. I swear, every time I go up, there's more and more buildings. And to be starting to have those conversations in Addison County now means we're so far behind, because they're actually building all of these buildings, and they're addressing the population issues. And Williston's had such a huge population boom that they may need to open schools, whereas we're talking about closing schools. So I think we recognize the issue, but we're so far behind. I don't know how to catch up with those towns.
Just to add anecdotally, Fairfax, for example, has been a rapidly growing town in Franklin County for decades, and that the development of the land there has been ongoing for years, from a very small farming community to a fairly relatively speaking, sizable bedroom community for Burlington and the Burlington area. So again, that work has been happening for 20 plus years.
Did you have something?
Yeah, I was just, the lack of affordable housing in our area is also a huge reason why people aren't coming. Or because of the lack of the people that want to be here will buy a 5-bedroom home when it's only 2 people.
Yeah, but the affordable housing question, if you read the community trust excerpts, they really focus on, I mean, that's their charter, so they talk at length about the affordability of housing, and then, you know, the other thing they talk about is the rate that housing costs go up don't match the rate that salary or compensation goes up. So every year, those two things are divergent and get further apart.
Well, Virgins is looking at the economic highway bypass is what I call it. And should that happen, they will be cutting out the trailer park, the trailer park in Virgins. So that would eliminate a lot of affordable housing, families, and so the big picture is huge.
I would also say it's
Troy wants
not
to chime
clear to
in.
me that various communities want to look like Chittenden County. I mean, people live here, some people live here because they like it being rural. Brad, maybe last comment on this, because we're, Troy, sorry, I got Troy on here too, okay. Go ahead, Brad, and then Troy.
Didn't you make the point also, in addition to housing, we have another significant infrastructure problem, and that is our roads. I mean, the communities north of Burlington have the interstate. We have Route 7 and Route 116. So.
Yes, I would add that into the mix.
And then I'm gonna go with Troy, he's on Zoom, if you, go ahead, Troy.
Hi, can you hear me? All of this really good discussion tonight, and I'm sorry I couldn't get there, but I've been able to be here for the meeting remotely. And all of this rings so true to how complicated all of this is in our decision making, but also reminds me of what somebody said before about how important it is for us to be leaders in this situation, and thinking about how can we provide the best education possible for anybody who is moving into the area. So when they're making a decision between Fairfax and Virgins and Waterbury and Bristol, that we have put together an educational system that they feel really confident about putting their kids in. So I think we could go on and on forever about the things we can't control. The interstate's been laid long ago, but what are the things that are in our control? And right now it's how we govern and manage our schools for the best interests of our community and our students.
Thanks, Troy, appreciate that. And then one more, go ahead, Ed.
I was just going to mention that in talking with real estate brokers, seems to be number 1 or number 2 question by somebody who wants to move in is access to high-speed internet. And even in Addison County, there's still any number of places you can go and lose it.
I think that was an important discussion. We went over a bit, but I think important information. So I'm going to go, Ed, if you could summarize, you looked at the Act 46 consolidation.
Present company accepted. We were there. I met with, I first went through the report and pulled out the high points that suggested a question, is to find out what the superintendent and staff could respond, how they could respond to it. And Patrick took that and gave it to his staff, and they worked on replies to it, and then I met with them, we talked them through, so. My opening remark quotes Patrick saying that what he now has, as a result of Act 46, is that he's got one school with a lot of campuses, as the best way to describe MAUSD right now. The merger of the governance from 7 down to 1 board has had all kinds of impacts, even in the short time that they've been in operation. They're only partway into their 4th year as a merged district. But in terms of giving the superintendent flexibility to move staff around to meet needs without having to riff, and resources as well, has been the most powerful and important tool of the merger. That being necessary in order to obtain equity for students across all 6 buildings. The one question that had a dollar attached to it was, did you save $140,000 in the first year? And they felt they did. Just reducing the number of audits of school budgets from 7 to 1, and also saving a position. There was an assistant to the business manager that they let go, and the stipends for the saved board members, $40,000 right there. I was one of them. I was the chairman of the Beaman School Board at the time. So I think that pretty much hits it.
Okay. Any questions on that? And Ed has linked a report as well. So. Keith, you want to just give us the overview on?
Yeah, the overarching story is not too dissimilar in what Act 46 did for the S Northwest District. We had fewer moving parts, so not quite as many campuses as not AVE district, but when looking at the Act 46, the merger study report and the articles of agreement, and whether or not the ends of that merger were achieved, I mean, I don't think anyone would disagree that the district is not in the place it would like to be right now, in a position of stability. Obviously, that's why we're here. But in terms of whether the district achieved a lot of the things that are stated in this merger study and in this in the articles of agreement, largely yes, with some works in progress. There's only one flat out no so far that I found in there, and that was whether or not we have achieved foreign language in the elementary school. That was mentioned in the merger study, but Sheila and I discussed it's never been expressed as a priority past that report. But looking at other issues here, increased coordination of mission, vision, and strategic statement. Yes, the district has a unified vision statement and has since developed processes for reviewing that for both within the board, within committee, and then with stakeholders in the district. Improving middle school experience for students, partially. It's a work in progress. We have, it's this week. This week we have a community engagement event based around this topic and how we are continuing to work toward improving middle school experience for students. Equitable class size, yes, particularly post repurposing of Edison Central School, which dramatically did not fall in line with the district vision for what an equitable class size is. But we have that at our 2 elementary schools, for example. Equitable staffing, reallocation from place of hire, partially. I'm just looking at my notes here. So, for example, we are now better able positioned to relocate people throughout the district rather than riffing them. where possible. So when needs within the district shift, that is an easier task to accomplish. A lot of the buildings have been brought under the aegis of a single person who is now district maintenance. What would Ken's position be called? Yeah, so a lot of those things that were all separate facilities, positions have sort of been brought under one umbrella. So it's allowed for a lot of coordination of the campuses within the district under a single position to provide equity services from that perspective. So a lot of the district services and curriculum have been able to align more. Referencing the dollar amount, the savings of in the administration of $40,000 to $80,000 in 1 year. Yes, it achieved that. In the first year of consolidation, there were savings of $129,679, to be very specific. Sustained programs when cutting budgets. Until now, yes. Although I think we're very much in a place where further cutting of the budget will definitively result in losing programs. Again, one of the reasons we're here. Slow the growth of homestead tax rates. Yes. I mean, that's sort of hard. A lot of these are sort of hard to pin down specifically whether or not ends were achieved. But I feel fairly confident that the rates are lower than they would have been without a merger. Yeah, I mean, I did not to get too much into my own gripes, but my youngest broke her arm last week, and so my life has been consumed with lifting small people into places they don't normally need to be lifted to all day long. So I will link this document or send it to Tracy so she can link it to you guys. But the details, but there are a lot of details here that might be worth going over on your own. I won't read them all to you. Yeah.
You used the term equitable class sizes. I presume what you meant was equal class sizes. I'm not sure how equitable.
I mean, within the range of our district policies, what our district has set forth in policy as being our ideal class size.
Yeah.
So equitable in the sense that all of our buildings in our campus fall within
They're
that
equal
range.
within 13 to 18 kids per class.
Exactly.
Like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we confuse equitable and equal a lot. Equitable means each kid gets what they need, right? Not necessarily the same number of hours of a nurse in the building. Some kids need more and some kids need less. So I think it's important that we use those terms correctly.
Thank you.
Sarah, go ahead.
One of my questions is for Ed. Just did you guys get into it all what has happened programmatically or curriculum-wise, or a lot of the stuff that has occurred to, I know it's not in our document from Act 46 or our report, but was there anything about, in your conversation about like your work of alignment or working together?
There was.
Okay.
I was very interested in what was done to bring the 5 elementary schools together programmatically. And the particularly math and literacy have been all placed on, so the same curriculum is being used in all the schools, with the notion that when they all get to 7th grade, they'll be pretty much in the same, at least coming from the same page. One of the things that did grow substantially, and I had watched it from afar, was the ELP summer and afternoon program. It had been only available where free and reduced lunch numbers were high enough, and that was in Bristol and Starksboro. But it's now offered in all the schools, including middle school and high school. that hadn't happened before and couldn't happen before because you had all those different contracts to deal with as well.
Go ahead, Brad.
Yeah, I just a sort of general question to two gentlemen. One of the things that's given me pause, think about a little bit about this committee's sort of charge, is that, what Ed pointed out, that the Act 46 is only 4 years into it. So I was just wondering, okay, we could decide to do further mergers, it's gonna be another 4 years to do something else. I mean, so I'm wondering if there was any conversation or any comments by the respective administrations about what may have been or may not have been left on the table from Act 46, things that just haven't been done yet, that might affect the sort of the future of the assistance.
We did, when I talked with Patrick, there are things that if this merger occurs, that there are opportunities to obtain more efficiencies due to scale, transportation being a big one. Program curriculum wise, we didn't get into, but no, not too much in the way of specifics. I did get the feeling we're on a path.
Well, I mean, I guess what it sounds like is the Act 46 sort of goals and objectives seem to have been maxed out, and I just want to know if that is the case.
I would say from my perspective, working as a teacher in the building and working with curriculum, that, huge progress has been made, but this is such big work that it takes, years, and, there are all of these different varying factors that are affecting the progress, including COVID. So, it will continue to be that way.
The, what do you call it, the master plan?
The strategic
Strategic plan, there you go. If you look at that as the roadmap, that Act 46 or the consolidation has allowed the district to move forward, that the surface has been barely scratched in that strategy that document's laid out.
I think it would be fair to say without Act 46, we couldn't be here. We wouldn't be here. You couldn't have skipped Act 46.
Yeah, and significant progress has been made. I mean, one of the goals is to have, K through 12 curriculum, and this year, years of work have been put in to make that a reality. For the first time in MAUSD, we have K through 12 transferable skills. The TLP process, which was part of Act 46, or sorry, Act 77, is going down to the elementary level. So there's a lot of progress. There's lots of barriers.
Thanks, everybody. I'm going to turn it over to Tracy to talk about plans for financial analysis. Just one.
Yep, there's one sheet with my handwritten notes on it coming around. Hopefully this is a quick decision. At the last meeting, you assigned the administration the work of doing those financial and tax rate analyses and projections into the future. And I would like to frame a way for us to manage that, given the current options on the table, and ask for your support for the program. I want to be clear that what I'm suggesting is not a decision about a preference between a union district option versus a union school option. It's really about how to use the resources that we have to best understand the work of this piece of the project and the implications for options. So going back to a couple of meetings ago when we talked about governance options, Three of the options we looked at were the current option. We also looked at a unified union school district for pre-K-12, and we looked at a union school structure for some grades. So I'd like to focus on these three options and not get into the variations of withdrawing districts and SU discussions. And to get you clear information with a reasonable amount of resources, what I would like to propose is that we model for you the current structures and the option 2, a unified union school district for pre-K-12, including what is now Mount Abe and Addison Northwest. We can pretty easily, nothing's easy, but create comparable financial and tax rate projections for those entities. For the new union school district, or new union school, delete the district, that is something that is extremely complex and difficult to project. And what might be helpful information for you to consider at this point is more of a one-pager report, perhaps, where I can outline the big decisions that have to be made and the key cost considerations that would need to be addressed. You know, I wouldn't, it's an incredibly complex thing to model for fiscal entities, especially when we haven't even identified the structures of those 4 fiscal entities. So I can kind of lay out the costs, the savings, and the big decisions to be made, so you have at least a conceptual model to think about in relation to the other 2, so that we can get you some financial information soon. Go ahead, Brad.
We'll include some of the variables related to the tax structure, you know, that I mentioned earlier. I mean, which is there's going to be income-based, property-based. Do we get?
No, it's not going to include those.
How about the weighting study?
I certainly can talk about how the weighting study could impact tax rates.
And how about, the sort of lifting of the particular spending threshold? Would that be, would we look at both of those too?
Yeah, that might not be hard to do.
I agree, it's really complex. It's not, I just worry, we get a picture, one data picture, and it kind of creates the narrative. Whereas there are so many different variables that affect that narrative.
Sheila wants to help.
I was just going to add that our projections already include that.
Okay.
The ones that we have to build off from already include both the weighting study and the threshold and those changes. So I think it would be easy to model that in comparison.
Good.
Thank you.
Kevin?
But as far as the threshold has been waived for 2 years pending adoption, theoretical adoption of the weighting study, but we don't know, or do we know that there will be some sort of constraint that would put something back in place similar to, so I mean, it's not like we're gonna have an open checkbook because that limitation's been waived for 2 years. I can't imagine.
But if those are easy enough to do with the threshold and without, then if some legislation happens, we'll have that.
In the weighting study, all we can do is sort of project what they have suggested they might implement. And, our modeling at least doesn't reflect, all of the conversations they've had about possibilities, categorical aid and how that might change. And we're just going off the original report where they provided some indication of what could happen. We don't know what will happen. So it's just hard to put all that into a model.
So these models will give us something at least to look at, and as things change, then, we look at something else, but are people good with us, maybe a thumbs up, obtaining those two initial comparatives that are outlined on this for the current versus the Unified Union School District, and then sort of a one-pager that Jason can put together, identifying the cost issues. Okay. Anybody have concerns about it? Got it. I didn't see everybody's thumbs up, so. Okay, all right, thumbs up or here. All right, no one has concerns, so Tracy, why don't you go ahead and work with Sheila and Patrick and.
Thank you, I
Put that
really
together.
appreciate that direction.
All right, so the next piece is to just sort of summarize key points from the meeting from tonight. I'll have just start out, Kevin, I thought that report was really helpful in terms of understanding the housing and other pressures that make it difficult to grow population in Addison County and how that affects our schools. So I think that's an important point.
Obviously the Act 46 commentary on the success of in the two different districts based on that activity.
Yeah.
Community engagement planner.
Community engagement planning, and Eric, I really appreciated your narrative on that. In terms of what we're trying to do in terms of community engagement. Anything else? We sort of, it was good. We finished sort of our own values, considerations, conversation, and helpful to have that all finalized.
We're still talking about the work plan and how to lay that out.
Yeah.
We had a robust discussion of how our population trends.
Anything else want to include in our summary? Okay. You got
I am
everything?
good.
Okay, I think Martha's looking at that. Raise your hand.
Oh, there's a hand.
There's a hand, Paul, for.
Paul, is that a hand or a thumbs up? Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Thanks. Paul Forlenza from Lincoln. I appreciate the reports that Keith and Ed did on whether or not, what the impact of Act 46 is, whether or not it's working. It seems to me that focused on governance and operational aspects. And I'm wondering if you would get a different cut at this if you talk to teachers and principals. So what I'm getting at is this actually working at the classroom level.
Principals.
Thanks, Paul.
Sure.
Any
you.
other public comment?
Are you still talking?
All right. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Keith moved second.
I second that.
Becca, I think, maybe?
Yes.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, everyone. We still went over.